Good evening, everyone. I am Lisa Feely, your host for An Accountable Catholic. This is a brand new show, and I'm really excited to be your host. The idea came about following some conversations recently with David about a recent book I published on the topic of accountability. That book's called An Accountable American, but as you might imagine, I am Catholic, and as a believer, we really feel that Catholics and Christians can be more accountable as brothers and sisters, as parents, and as members of a greater Christian community. And I'm really excited to be hosting this show. The objective is really to offer some guidance to our listeners and the importance specifically, I guess, on the importance of choosing to be an accountable Catholic and an accountable Christian. Our show is really to welcome everyone to join our listening audience. Every Thursday evening for 30 minutes, we're going to have some wonderful guests on the show, and we'll be having some conversations to have them share their life experiences around topic of accountability and how by being more accountable, we can really better use the talents God gave us. And the whole purpose is to make a difference in other people's lives. So tonight, we are really excited because I want to welcome a very special guest. And Ilan, if I am not saying your name right, you're going to have to help me. So he's got a really unique last name as well, but it's Mr. Ilan Sculovicz. And thank you for joining me, Ilan. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much. You nailed it. You got my last name perfect.
Okay. I know it's your unique story behind it, so I want you to share a little bit about your parents as well, if you don't mind, on how you came up with your name, how they came up with your name, or I know there's a little story behind that. So will you share that along with a little bit about your background?
Well, my background's an interesting one for sure in terms of where my parents are from. My mom is from the Middle East. She was born in Baghdad, Iraq. And my dad is from Europe, and he was in the Holocaust, his family. And they ended up meeting years later. My mom escaped Iraq, and my dad left Europe when he was quite young. I'm a first-generation American, the only American in my family. My grandfather's last name, actually, we don't really know the exact spelling of it or anything like that. But when he left, he changed his name, and so it turned into that. I think he thought that sounded like a more Western name. Western variation.
I love it.
Of his name. I don't know.
Well, it makes you unique. That's what counts.
Yeah. So, quite interesting there.
And now you also have a very unique background with regards to your kind of career choice or what you studied, because I learned from what I could read that you did 3D animation and you've done arts and the dramatic arts, and actually was an actor for a while. And then, Ilan, it's pretty easy. You just jump from that to becoming a CEO of a watch company. Nothing special there. How did that all come about? That's an incredible journey.
So I've always loved anything artistic, whether it's painting more recently. The past couple of years I've been painting, but before that I'd always liked anything artistic, whether it was acting, writing, however I could express myself. I always just kind of wanted to get in there. And so 3D animation was a good kind of way to do that as well. I could create these little films and do it by myself. I wasn't reliant on anyone. And acting, I've always just had a passion for it because you get to live 100 different lives, and it was a way to just jump in and experience things and be around people. And so the arts was a nice way to kind of challenge, at the time I felt, growing up, to challenge perceptions in society, to challenge ideas. I feel very differently about that now. I feel like it's an echo chamber. But moving on to the watch company, the designing the watches was kind of the same idea. I always feel like when I design a watch, it's a form of art. It's art you wear on your wrist. But I was looking to buy my father a watch for his 65th birthday. And me and him, I was kind of a rough kid growing up, and he really took care of me. And then I had some serious health issues, and he took care of me there too. He didn't give up on me when I was acting out, when I was younger. And then when I got sick, he was there for me on a dime and got me through it. And I can honestly say I don't know where I'd be without him. I might not be here today. And so I wanted to find a way to pay tribute to that. And I went out looking for a cool watch to buy him, and nothing felt right. And the things that I did like were so expensive. We're talking about like $20,000 for a unique looking different watch. So I started just designing something for the sake of it, and then going through the process of learning how to make it and and what would it take to actually design this form and put it together. And interestingly enough, the 3D animation studio I was working at was a very, very big studio, and they had all types of machines like rapid prototyping stuff and 3D printing. And this is a while ago before this was so popular. So I just started using that and designing a watch, and I give it to him, and it turned into a company because we had such a strong response to it from everyone who saw it. And he said, maybe you should start making watches.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Oh, I think it does take a design background. Boy, watches are very unique, and I think that's yours are. The ones that I've seen on your website are beautiful. So you gave it to your dad, and I assume he loved it.
Yeah.
The watch.
And then pretty much I put it on some forums, and people asked where they could get it, so I just started making them. And then from there, it kind of blossomed into what it is today, this bigger company. It took time, and I've always just been working at it and trying to make it happen. I still do the other stuff. I still act. I still do 3D animation for fun, but the company is obviously my priority in terms of work and passion on many levels. And so, there's a whole continued story there, obviously, of what the company turned into and what I use it for and all that.
I was just going to say, it's really has a life on its own, but I think not falling too far. They say, a kid doesn't fall too far from the apple, right, from the tree. And then your watch company, I think you created it, but you've got a lot of great messages that are coming from that for our country. And we'll talk a little bit about that, like you said. So I love that you've joined us tonight for a conversation on accountability, faith, and choice. In that regard, as you know, the book, and I'd written this book, and it was really focused on accountability. And one of the chapters I talk about is faith and choice. I really feel like those two really can help someone achieve peace and prosperity in their life. Will you talk a little bit about how faith and choice has played a role in you living your life?
So faith is a very interesting thing in general, in my experience, in my own life, and how it's kind of come about. Like I said, my mother came from a country that's very fundamentalist. My dad came from a history where religion was targeted and caused genocide. And so I always had this view of religion that it was a negative in many ways growing up. I've seen the negative. I've seen its impact on my family. I've seen fundamentalism in the Middle East. I've seen what happened in Europe. And I was always somewhat scared of the idea that this could happen in my life. And it essentially, interestingly enough, it took me many years to kind of come to terms with there's a difference between the actions of man and the perversion of what may be written versus what is actually there and what is, let's say, the Word of God, or how we should be living our lives. And it came about a lot because of what's been happening in recent years, this obsession with identity politics, and not seeing individuals as as divine beings, but as collective groups where we deny people's actual individual beauty.
Right, we try to lump them into something.
What's that?
We try to lump them into identification, right? Whether you're, this race or that, right? I mean,
well, if God does not exist, right, then everything is somewhat nihilistic. Then there's no true value to anything, right? So we just kind of live our lives, we do what we do. Then we need to create value. We need to give something to have meaning, because there is no God, so we have no relationship with something bigger than ourselves. And I think that leads into identity politics, because you create a relationship with toxic things. And what are those toxic things? Your skin color. Your skin color does not define you. You're far more unique and beautiful as an individual, as a divine being, than you are as your skin color, or as your gender, or as all these things that people have become obsessed with.
Or political affiliation. Exactly. Yep.
Yes, these are hierarchies that are created by man, not by God. And it comes about through nihilism, through a lack of believing or having a relationship with something bigger than yourself. It's why we see so much divorce and so many toxic relationships, because we're taking all that stuff that is bigger than any person can ever give you, and more special than any single person can ever give you. It's something bigger than yourself. And we're putting that onto people when we should be putting it onto something bigger than ourselves, bigger than a human. And so if we take that relationship away from something bigger than ourselves and we try and put it onto a human being, it's never going to work. And what we do is we create, like I said, all these hierarchies and all these things to try and find value in our life, because we're not getting it if we don't have God. There's no real meaning to anything. And so in recent years, just the escalation of all these things and seeing people go deeper and deeper into it, I started kind of coming back to religion and coming back to just looking at the bare bones of it and what does it mean. And
right, where'd we come from? Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said, you said it perfectly, and where we really came from, right? What's our purpose?
Yes, exactly. And I find that that's actually the cure to a lot of what's going on today in society. And it's a shame to see people moving further and further away from it. And we're just becoming so obsessed with physical things like our Instagram accounts, our follower counts, our immediate, we need like immediate results.
Right. Gratification. We don't know. Yep. Yes. Yep.
Yes. And so all of that again is a result of turning away from God. We don't know how to work for things anymore. And it obviously ties into accountability, like you say, because if you're accountable, all these things, again, they start to disappear. And so
I think we have
that's
flipped.
Where we are.
You said it. I think that we have flipped around, though, because now you have so many younger people that because they haven't been taught any faith or a believer in a greater good or God or anything. At least for me, my faith has always helped me determine what to value most, right? But if you don't have that, then you don't feel consequences, right? So you don't have to be held accountable because you're just doing what feels good or what's right. And then to your point, and then you feel, oh, well, I have to be part of this group. And then the group's going to tell me how to think. It's like this giant group think, which is not what I think God or faith is all about. And then you're making the wrong choices, right? If you don't know what you value and your value is not based on, right? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that if you don't have an idea of God, if you don't follow any type of religion, if you essentially are just living for yourself, then good and bad ceases to exist. There is no actual good and bad, right? Why would murder be bad? If God doesn't exist, if there's nothing greater than yourself, if it's strictly this physical world, you live and you die, why does it matter when you die? Why does it matter if you go kill people? Why does any of this matter? And we actually see that. We see that as, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I'd have conversations. Abortion was a really interesting topic for me. And it
obviously
was
a hot topic among we Catholics, too.
Yeah. But 6 years ago, you couldn't bring up late-term abortion. People weren't for it. It was a very taboo 6-8 years ago. I don't know the exact timeline, but this was a very taboo thing to say, I believe a baby at 8 months can be aborted, and we should not have any type of legislation against this, and that it's wrong. So that was the standard view, was that it was wrong,
right,
to have late-term abortion.
Yes.
And in just 6 years, everyone I talk to who's progressive now or identifies as liberal does not believe in any term limits whatsoever, does not believe it's anyone's job to tell a woman what to do with her body, does not believe that a fetus in any way, shape, or form has the right to life at any point. We've gone from saying, like, okay, abortion in the first trimester to saying seconds before birth, out the canal, but the umbilical cord is still attached. That is a denial of God. Because if you have no right and wrong, fundamentally, you can do anything. There is no limit to what you can justify. And so they feel totally justified and righteous and on the side of justice by saying, no, a baby that is even outside the womb, that is still connected to the umbilical cord, if the mother doesn't want it, it can die, because there's no objective standard to any of this stuff.
Right.
And so you can, like you said, you can convince people anything as long as your group is telling you that is right. You don't have a higher force or some objective, true standard for good and bad, then you will find a way to justify any behavior.
Right. So how would you encourage, what I guess I'm trying to do through my book and through, we were obviously at this radio show, really trying to help people understand their faith better and leverage faith to be more accountable, to make the right choices in life. Are there some steps that you went through in your life, maybe in the last 10 years or however long, that, because you've had a very interesting path, and a lot of times in the arts, like you said, especially if you were out in California and certain states that tend to be very big in the arts, in New York and everything, there's sometimes some outside forces or a lot of, strong arming of making sure you believe a certain way or whatever, go along with a crowd, which doesn't seem to be, gee, let's all make sure, like when I was a kid, we were all involved in young life, right? And we were all, I can't ever imagine missing church, when I was young. But today, I think that's not the case for most 16 to 20-year-olds. Have any thoughts on kind of how you, I guess, became stronger in your faith and how that played a role in the choices you made and where you've come in your journey?
So again, first of all, we've lost the culture war, right? These values are lost to Hollywood, to the media, to all of the education system, are all kind of one view and one view only, and it's a view against God in many ways.
Right.
And
definitely against religion, I feel.
Unless you're part of religion that fits the scale of identity politics where, hey, you're a victim, so, your religion matters. But if you're looking at Christians specifically, there's a mass denial. No one talked about Coptics in Egypt. No one ever talked about the persecution of Coptics in Egypt or what happened to Christians in Iraq. No one ever talks about that, Assyrian Christians and different groups in Iraq that were targeted, different sects of Christianity.
Yeah.
No one ever wants to talk about Christian persecution around the world because according to identity politics and the left, Christians are considered privileged. And so therefore you do not have to talk about any plight. You can target them. And so it's fascinating. So on that, again, the battle here becomes a battle of, again, identity politics versus a battle of religion and a culture. And when every institution is against that, it's very, very hard to affect it on a mass scale. Now, on an individual scale, what worked for me, the reason I got back into it, was because I was put in a position to reassess my own values and what I believe. And again, I always felt a calling to God, I guess you could say. You go into a church and you feel something.
Yes.
I think most people do.
Yes.
And I think all of us in our lives, I don't care how nihilistic we become, are still looking for value. That's why nihilism is dangerous. That's why all these things exist. And so it's a matter of really looking inward and saying, well, what really matters? What really has, eternity behind it? What really has the kind of beauty that I'm looking for that will allow me to live my life the way I want and feel complete? And am I going to feel complete living for myself, or am I going to feel complete living for something bigger than myself and living for others?
Right.
And so when you start going in that direction, it takes the place of anything else. It really does. It's just hard, like you said, to convince the masses of this because of every institution against it. But again, it's on each person to choose to make that choice, to come back to themselves and say, well, where does my happiness truly lie? And I think that's what I did. I said, what really does make me happy? What relationships really do matter in my life? And I just had to look inward and come back to that. And so, it's a tough thing to answer in terms of what could sway the masses. But on an individual level, it really comes down to you being accountable for your own choices and what you want to believe in.
I love what you say on that because I'm convinced, like you are, I don't think there's a magic pill as Christians where we can say, and especially as Catholics, we could, wave some magic wand, other than maybe divine intervention where, masses are convinced that it's right to be good Christians or good Catholics. But I do think, and that's what I'm hopeful, I guess, that when you do something out of love and you're trying to help each individual, right, look inward and decide what they value, and if they can grasp truth, right? And I love what you say about truth. I'll let you talk to it some next too, is if they'll just search out actual truth and fact, and then if they can realize that and keep all the noise, I call it noise, when it's untruths, right? Keep all that away from your thinking, then you can start making the right choices. And then it's very powerful once you get back into your faith and then you want to be involved in a community and you're helping that community and you're living for more than just yourself, right? And what you believe. But you talk about truth sometimes. Can you tell our listeners what your feeling on truth is?
Well, I mean, like previously said, I think there is a truth. There is not, an opinion about truth. And I think it exists. I think there's mass denial of truth nowadays. And if you're constantly seeking that truth and you're being honest with yourself. Again, like I said, there's more than in this life than just being selfish and kind of seeking out these specific things that have no real value. And again, we talked about money earlier privately between you and I, and the obsession with wealth. And none of that is actually true to living to a higher purpose.
Right.
And so, again, it just comes down to constantly questioning yourself, questioning what you believe, being willing to reevaluate what you believe is a tough thing, and not worrying about social pressure, and just doing it, just going out there and saying, okay, well, I'm going to stand by my beliefs. Even I don't want to get back into the company thing, but even putting my company forward for the things I believed in was an attempt to seek truth. That's why the video is called Speak Truth.
I love it.
I believe in objectivity.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love it. Talk a little bit about the Speak Truth, though. But I mean, that's exactly what I'd love to get into. What was behind that? What made you bring your company into doing something different, where it really is delivering a fantastic message to the country?
So the first time I did I guess you would call it a controversial message, which is a little bit surprising because it's such a rational message, was one where I celebrated masculinity, because I felt like for a long time, again, within this identity politics thing, there's been an attack on not only masculinity, but traditional gender roles. Gender in general no longer seems to exist to people. The same people that call everyone else a science denier are saying that biology isn't real, and that anyone is
example.
anything.
Yep. Yes. Yep.
So I had a strong reaction to that Gillette video, but that Gillette video was just a straw that broke the camel's back. I had been witnessing this kind of the phrasing toxic masculinity, and I noticed that men are no longer taking the roles that they used to, which are, I'm not going to get into it, but essentially there was just this huge attack on masculinity, and everyone's seeing it as a negative thing. It's continued on until today. We don't. There's a whole thing here going on, in my opinion.
Right.
The breakdown of the two-parent household. It's a much deeper issue, but the Gillette ad I was like, wow, now companies, huge companies, Gillette, a company that is designed to celebrate men. It's a shaving company. It's a company that its sole purpose should be to celebrate masculinity, is now coming out against it. And so I had put a video out called What is a Man? And it celebrated masculinity, and it showed the sacrifices that men make. And that was like the first foray into saying, hey, we need to reevaluate what's going on. That was my first attempt at putting out what I believed was a truth into the world. And it had a very, very strong response.
Well, no, did. You had. I mean, I love it. And the reason I wanted to bring that up was because you had over 2 million views or more now. And I think we like to call ourselves Catholics or Christians, but a large majority of what we're really allowing others to teach our children, or this mass media, and even some of our own generations moved away from truly trusting God or believing in a greater power. And again, that has, you said it, in our school systems and everything, we're allowing a separation of our faith from values. And we won't get into the details, but as well as I do with even politicians and everything. It's like, oh, well, don't worry about integrity or any of the other things. They're good for this. It's like, but you can't. I don't know. I have never been able to separate value from choices I make. It's like breathing. I mean, if you have no consequences, you have no belief in God, then no wonder we've had a 500% increase in violent riots. And to your point, and I did 350 hours of research for my book, Ilan, there's a lot of more, poverty now because there's a lot more babies being born to only single moms, and we're in an endless cycle. I mean, we are not going down a great path. So when your company and other companies really start stepping out and I think saying what I want to believe, 70% of the country probably really does believe. We're just letting smaller percentages of our country kind of take us by storm somehow. But I appreciate that, and I think that you're. I do think it's a brave thing to do, but I think it's the right thing to do. And I think, and I pray that God's, as Jesus taught us, the truth will set you free. The truth will allow you to, if you know Him, you know the truth, and you're in a better position knowing that. So I appreciate you sharing all that.
Thank you. Yeah, and the issue with the lack of fathers in the household is the number one contributor to violent crime, is the number one contributor to poverty, number one contributor to most likely having addiction issues as you grow older. There's all types of issues associated in every study with not having a father present in the home. And again, that's an attack on traditional marriage, traditional relationships, which are heavily under attack by every institution. Again, so it's not that people are moving away from it naturally. There is a movement to attack it. In university, in school, from a young age now. All these ideas are under attack. So I want to draw that distinction. It's very important. And so there is, to some degree, not to sound weird about it, there is to some degree good versus evil. We have to accept that, right? And some ideas are not good ideas, and we see the application of them. And so we have to be willing. I think the number one mistake that I see most people making nowadays is complacency, is not being willing to speak. So the Speak Truth video, the second video I made, that was the one in support of police because of everything I saw going on. And that one also had a very, very strong reaction. But more so, just in general, if people don't start standing up for these values and these ideals, we're going to lose the battle. Like I said, we've already lost the culture war. So the more we sit back and be complacent, I remember my friend gave me a really great analogy. He knows how passionate I am about this stuff. I went with him to a monastery, a Catholic monastery. It was a really interesting experience where they don't speak. They take vows of silence.
Right. I have friends that have done that.
Our hermits. And it's just really, really unique, beautiful experience there. And so I left there. I was so much more relaxed than I'd been in a long time because I'm very, very, very passionate about these issues, and they can get to me. They can actually kind of tear me down a little bit. So, I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost customers for my company. I've just seen a lot of the kind of backlash that just putting out a video supporting police can do. And I don't want to get into some of the personal stuff that's been said about me. That's completely absurd. But people will come after you personally, privately, to try and damage you when you speak, even just in support of police, in support of masculinity, not attacking anything. In other words, every message I've put out has been in support of something. Every message they've put out has been an attack on something. You ever notice that dynamic?
Oh, no, when absolutely, yes. And yet there's, again, many of these, I say truly non-believers will also have you believe power to truth, right, or whatever they claim. So they're not wanting the truth, really. It's an irony.
Yes, absolute irony. But his analogy was a beautiful one. He said, Ilan, he was talking about Noah getting, knowing that a flood was coming.
Yes.
And he said, you can't go out there and build an ark for everyone. He's like, you got to build your own ark and take care of the people close to you and not get caught up in the flood. Because if you start dipping your feet into the flood, if you start running around and arguing with everyone that a flood is coming and making sure they all build their arks, he goes, you're not going to have your own ark to build. And so I tried that. I think, and then I realized, well, that's a form of complacency too, but it really helped me for a while because I could take a step back and say, it's not my job to make sure that everyone knows or has to believe what I believe. I can't convince everyone. I can't get into these arguments. But then it also came to a point where I felt like God does need warriors.
Right.
And so it is okay to sometimes get caught up in the flood. It is okay to jump in there and fight and say that this is what's right.
Onward, Christian soldier. That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
and so you need that too. Otherwise, we lose the battle. I just wanted to mention that story because it was something I struggled with for a long time. It's like, is it okay that I feel like I need to fight and that's my place and that's my duty, right, to go out there and try and change the narrative? And it's not everyone's duty, but I do feel like we need more warriors to get up and say, no, I'm going to put myself on the line and do this.
Well, I could be wrong here, but I do happen to remember quite a few Bible stories where everyone wants to believe Jesus was mild, meek, and shy, and nice and loved everyone all the time. But I remember a few tables being tossed, and he wasn't. He is absolutely a fighter, especially for truth and what's right. But as we end our first show, I'd love for you to at least talk a little bit about Thin Blue Line and your watch, because, again, you and I have quite a bit in common. One, I'm very close to, or was close to my dad before he passed, and I'm a daddy's girl, and you're very close to your father, and with regards to giving charity. Our book, much of the money goes to charity. And then you've got Thin Blue Line, and one of our charities for our national charity is the FOP, and I think you're donating some of your watch proceeds, right, for a certain watch to police. Is that right?
Yeah, we're donating. So from the Thin Blue Line watch itself, 15% off the top goes to 3 police charities. We've chosen 2 of them, and we're letting our customers choose the third. So we're donating to COPS, which is one of the biggest police charities. And Cannonball Memorial Run, which is some guys I met who are really great, and they're police, and they go around the country giving the funds they raise to the families of police officers who've died in the line of duty, and they donate 100% of it. They don't keep anything for themselves.
Fantastic.
They don't even have
And is there some website? That's fantastic. We really appreciate that. I mean, and I'm sure the police do. That you're contributing, and it means a lot to them and their families. Can you share a website or anything for people to learn more about that?
Yeah, so the COPS website here, let me just make sure I get it right. So Cannonball Memorial Run, I believe, is just Cannonball Memorial Run, and if the website might be cannonballmemorialrun.org, if I remember correctly.
Now, can they buy the Thin Blue watch there as well and contribute, or is there a place they can get the...
No, the Thin Blue Line watch is only available on our website, egardwatches.com.
Very good.
And it's a unique watch. I built it with the help of police officers. We put St. Michael on the back for protection, and it represents everything we wanted to say about police and the sacrifices
you
got
a saint behind you. That works.
What's that?
I said you have a saint behind it. That works.
Yeah,
that works.
Yeah, because that's what every police officer asks for.
That's great.
Protection.
Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us on this show, and I know we'll have you back for a few more. But everyone, we have come to the end of our show, and thank you for joining us this evening. It was wonderful, Ilan, having you on the show. And for those of you who really want to learn more about Ilan, again, you can look him up on YouTube for sure, and he's got a few different websites, and of course his beautiful Egard watches. And then if you want to learn more about how to be accountable, and you have some family and friends who would benefit from learning the steps to enlightenment, peace, and prosperity through accountability, visit us at Carolina Catholic Radio. Have a blessed week, and hope to have you listening again next Thursday at 5 p.m.
Carolina Catholic Radio is excited to announce an alliance with Lisa Feely, author of An Accountable American. Her new book offers a blueprint to every person who wants to embrace how to be accountable. Learn how positively to impact your life and the lives of anyone around you. 50% of the book profits will be donated to a local 501c3 Catholic charity, including Carolina Catholic Radio and those affiliated with us. 2020 was a tough year for many people. Consider donating to charity by buying a copy of An Accountable American, just $20 on our website. Achieving accountability is a great way to start the new year. If you want to learn how to achieve enlightenment, peace, and prosperity, this is a great start.